Swamiji, I wanted to ask you, you did the Kayakalp in the 40 days living in complete darkness. Can you tell the experience?
Yeah. Well, I did a lot of preparation for it. I did almost 9 months of panchakarma to purify the body and to strengthen it, to get it ready to go through a period of 40 days and 40 nights in complete darkness. The room was completely darkened, fasting, and in solitude and silence. It was extraordinary. It was absolutely extraordinary. You know, being cut off from the world, the external world, my attention was completely indrawn, completely introverted, so I could go deeper into my own being, and I just discovered dimensions that I'd never recognized. I'd had direct experiences of my own self, but the inner dimensions, some of those realities had not become real to me yet. One of the things that I remember fondly is being able to hear the inner nada, the different types of sounds that are always there. The yogic tradition talks about 10 levels of nada, and I'd read about those, but I'd never experienced all of them. And I became extremely sensitive to the inner sounds. There was even a period of time, by the way, where I had night vision, where I could, in complete darkness, it was as if there was a blue light, consciousness coming out, and I could see in the dark. And the first couple of times it happened, I closed my eyes and went under the cover to see if it was maybe some light sneaking into the room. I couldn't believe that I could actually. It's like when you see those war movies where they have the night vision goggles on. I'd be looking, and this was a blue light. It was coming from here, and I could look around the room and see things. And I covered myself in a blanket to make sure there was no external light, and I could see in there in complete darkness. So sometimes that happened, but it was mostly the experience of the inner dimensions of sound, where I could hear melodies that had already been created in the divine mind that hadn't been received yet by composers. I could see the place where the Vedas came from, where that knowledge was received. It's already created in the divine mind. It's not like somebody wrote down and thought about the words of the Vedas. No, they received them. That's why they were often called rishis. You could say they saw them, they heard them, however it was downloaded. And I would get these downloads where it would be, an idea would come, which was a big idea that would take maybe a book to describe, but it would arrive as a single idea. It's like a single packet, like a photon, like a single packet of information, and it would be like, whoa. And I would understand whole dimensions of scripture that I had never understood before. Much of it was related to sound, the 4 levels of sound, the concept of anuttara, what's it like in beyond the level of form. Much of it's very difficult to describe, but mostly it was being able, one of the things that happened, I recall, that was very interesting, was being able to hear the 50 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet in things other than spoken language. So I could hear the birds and the different animals, and I could still hear outside, but I could hear the Sanskrit sounds that were coming from them in their own language. It sounded differently, but when I would run the water, I could hear the water landing in different places, and the sounds that were coming from it were forming the different sounds of the Sanskrit alphabet. At a certain point, they actually began to form words that I could hear, which is a whole other story.
Wow, it's really maybe in the future I will do this 40 days. You also planning to do 3 months also in future?
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, around day 35 of this, I was in communication with the doctor. That's the only one I would see or talk to. He would come because they wanted to make sure I didn't die, get enough nutrition and all of that. And I did communicate to him at one point. I said, what would it be like if I went 60 days? He said, you're healthy enough. You can do that if you choose to do that, but let's wait till the end and see. And that week, I began to molt my skin. So one of the things that happens, there's different types of Kayakalp, but began to peel off big layers of skin. With my whole body molted like a snake. And it was a little freaky at that point, right? Because I've been like, I even told the doctor that maybe I need some oil or something. My skin's all falling off. He said, that's the sign that you're complete. That's the last. Now, there are more intense Kayakalpas that you can do, where your teeth fall out, and your hair falls out and then grows back its original color. I did notice when I went in, I was completely white. When I came out, there were patches of my hair that were black. My hair's been white for 30 years. So, so there are different levels, and I'm in a place in my life now where I really don't plan anything. If an opportunity comes to do a 120-day Kayakalpa, I would do that. By the way, I took certain herbs. I took, Brahmrasayan. I took Brahmrasayan to keep the brain active while I was there. But there's others that you can do a Kayakalpa that's a little even more intense. And we'll see if I'm brave enough to give up my teeth and my hair. And that I'm not quite sure. My fear would be all the teeth fall out, but what if they don't grow back? You know, I was like, I'm not sure I'm ready to risk that one yet.
Wow, yeah. Everyone must try this Kayakalp. It's like transforming the whole body and mind.
And it was really true. I mean, the idea behind it, the Kayakalp that I did, was that it resets your biological clock. And the way it does that is when you've depleted all the fat in your body, when you're really truly fasting, the healthy cells in your body begin to eat the unhealthy cells. So let's suppose you have the beginning of cancer or the beginning of some disease. There's some unhealthy cells there. The healthy cells will eat that. So at this period of, and that's according to the Vedas, there's specific time frames that you do this. And the idea is that you reset your biological clock by as much as 50 years. So this is the secret of some of the great yogis who live 200, 300 years. They do this every 30 or 40 years to keep the body young. And it's really true. When I entered the Kayakalpa, I had normal aches and pains of a 70-year-old man. When I came out, I didn't. I had no physical. The first week was really intense. The first 10 days was intense physical pain. I went through it. And there were certain markers in this 40-day process. You go through the first part of it, the first maybe 2 weeks is a lot of physical getting used to and physical pain. And I did. I had excruciating muscle cramps, you know. And then you go through any emotional traumas that haven't been processed come to the surface, and I went through all of that. Then you get to the causal level, and sometimes even towards the end, entities may come, you know, or other azures and things like that kind of tempt you away from completing the process. And I went through all of that. So I had some pretty intense, scary visitations. So you just go through all of that, and it was beautiful.
It's not easy to, like, common people who don't meditate, who can't sit for 1 hour in meditation. It's very hard to go in this state.
Well, I've had many friends say they want to do it, and then they've gone to the doctor, and the doctor interviewed them and said, try a week. Some of them have been given as much as 3 weeks in the silence, but you have to be comfortable in your own skin. So if you haven't done sufficient sadhana to control the mind, you know, there's a chance for a schizophrenic break. People that are alone in darkness by themselves, fasting, some things can happen. So the doctor checked me, and he said, I was his first one in 40 years of practice that he recommended do it. And this was his interest in medical school, was this Kayakalpa, but he hadn't found someone who was ready to do it. And I had done Panchakarma with him several times. He said, would you be interested in doing it? I never heard of Kayakalpa. He suggested, he said, would you like to do this? It would be of benefit to you, and I would be willing to undertake this project with you. And he did. Set it up, found an ashram for me to live, darkened the room, you know, had somebody provide me. I did get milk and ghee every day. I got it straight from a cow that was 30 feet away from me. I was staying right by the Goshala, so I'd hear the mooing, and I go, oh, it's time for breakfast.
And how did you expend your time during the darkness? What did you do? Like, there was nothing to read, nothing to do, but how did you, like, make your time?
Well, that went through several phases. You know, when I first entered, I had the same question, how am I going to spend my time? So I had a schedule set up. I would be so many hours of hatha yoga, so many hours of pranayama, do this mantra, do that mantra, do walking meditation, do seated meditation, do yoga nidra. I had a whole schedule, right? And this lasted a few days. At a certain point, you begin to lose track of whether it's day or night. So sometimes you come out of meditation, you'd have no clue whether it was daytime, nighttime, whatever. The only thing was I'd hear the cows in the morning mooing. I knew it was time for some morning milk. I would get a little taste of milk there, and I would milk that opportunity for like as much as an hour, a little sip, just so I would take my time. But eventually what happened was that the states, waking, dream, deep sleep, and samadhi, began to blend into one, where they weren't really different. So I was in touch with that unchanging awareness, and I would notice that the body would go through changes. Sometimes it would be seemingly awake. I would be aware of the room around me. I could hear some sounds outside, so I'd hear monkeys playing on the roof or something like that. But eventually it was sort of like I reached a state where I didn't really need to practice much, but my body needed to move a little bit. So what I did is I brought some yoga mats with me into the room. And I had a bed. I even had water and a toilet. I was originally thinking I was going to be in a cave. I didn't have any warm water, and it was cold. It was January. It was very cold, But I laid my yoga mats out in a line around the bed and to the wall. So I created like 3 steps this way and 4 steps that way. So when I got to the end of the yoga mat, I knew the wall was there. So I would often spend hours doing walking japa and experiment with different mantras that I'd been given by my teacher. So sometimes I would be doing Om Namah Shivaya, and that would generate a particular experience. Other times it would be Aham Brahmasmi, sometimes Soham, Hamsa, Guru Om. I even began, because I had plenty of time, began to repeat some of the prayers I did as a child, being raised Catholic. And I used to do japa as a child. I would say, Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place my trust in thee. Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place my trust in thee. I experiment with some Christian mantras like I and the Father are one. I and the Divine Mother are one. So I was able to entertain myself, but just stay in the vibration, the frequency of everything is consciousness. Everything is conscious. This was a chance to really internalize my energy without having any external pulls. I never had any cravings, never had any desires. It was truly blissful. I didn't miss anyone or anything. I didn't need anything. It was just a period of contentment. That's why I thought about staying longer. And when I came out, the only desire I had was to share what I'd received with other people. So I'd say that was the big transition where I think I truly became free of desire. At that point, there was nothing that I lacked, nothing that I wanted, nothing that I craved. But I do have a desire to share this with other people. And it's not so much a desire or a lack, but a sense of like, the more I can give, the more I share, the more full I am. It's the only way to describe it. So when I teach to learn as well. So when I'm sharing with you, I'm really speaking to myself. When I lead meditation, I guide you into meditation, I'm describing my inner process to meditate. And so I've really come to experience that giving and receiving are one. There's no longer a sense of duality. I give and you receive. So as I'm giving, I'm receiving fully. And the more I give, the more full I become. So the sense of inner and outer really dissolved the idea that there's a border here called a body, and this is the inside, that's the outside. Just dissolved.
My one more question is like how a person can start meditation. Like normally people want to do the meditation but they can't start, and they do a certain period of time and then stop like this. So how can they continue in this path?